Welcome to Fated, a podcast brought to you by Majella and Carlie, two romantasy-obsessed readers who believe that great books must include declarations of undying love and deep thrusts of desire. Diving into the spicy, smutty fantasy genre, we are here for both the rattling of stars and headboards, and our podcast starts with the worlds of SJM, but delves into other realms. Did we mention that washboard abs and wands of all kinds are welcome in this inclusive and magically charged space? No topic is off limits, and no one is forced to have only one favourite heroine. Welcome to Fated, where we are unabashedly and wholeheartedly hot and heavy for spicy fantasy fiction. It's time to sit down and smut up. Warning, spoilers ahead.
Hello and welcome to Fated. I'm Carlie.
And I'm Majella. And today we are talking about, do your expectations, and I guess have our expectations and the way we read romantasy books, has that changed the more we have read? Said in another way, have we become more critical and judgmental of books that if we had read them right at the beginning of our romantasy journey, we would have been like, loved it, 5 stars, this is amazing, couldn't put it down. And now, you know, over 100 books later or years later, would we now pick that up and be a little bit less impressed by it? Still not have a negative response, but maybe we're sitting at a 3.5, a 4, maybe we're raving about it less. And I thought that was interesting because we've both had some experiences recently where we've read books and they've either been hard to start, so we've picked them up and put them down a few times, or we haven't had the same reaction that the TikToker that shared the video about the book had, or the hundreds of TikTokers we've seen. So we're going to talk about, you know, whether the hype matched the sort of resulting reading experience that we had, or if it's the fact that the more we read, we have just become more discerning and maybe more nuanced in the tropes that we really connect with and the writing styles that stir the big feelings or the plot points that we didn't see coming, you know. So I thought that was a really interesting thing for us to dive into this week. But before we do, Carlie, I just need to know, what are you reading currently?
So I have, being school holidays and a little bit of a madhouse at my place, I have lacked the lovely sort of lengthy reading bouts that I really became used to while my kids were at school. Last night I finished Ledge by Stacey McEwen, which is our book club book for 8. So that's wrapped up and I'm going to just jump straight into her second book, which is called Chasm. So that's what I'm reading on the Kindle. And then this morning on my run, I was like, I want to listen to another audiobook. I haven't listened to an audiobook for a little while. And I actually saw it came up in the recommendations on Spotify that Legends and Lattes.
Oh, yes, I've seen that. Definitely.
Have you seen that? Everywhere. I've seen it everywhere. Legends and Lattes by Travis Baldry. And I was like, oh, well, that's there. Let's go. So I listened to 6 chapters of that on my run this morning. So I'm just getting into that one. We'll see how that goes. But yeah, I've seen that all over TikTok. I've seen people recommend that. So I'm gonna listen to that and I'll let you know. I'll let you know what that. But again, I was like, this is not on my TBR. This is not on my list of books that I was going to read or listen to. Why am I jumping into something new? But you know, Spotify chucked it in there for a reason. So what about you? Since last we met, which has been a couple of weeks, you've read a couple of books, I hear.
I mean, I have, but that's because they're so easy to read. And the series is called the Guild Hunter series, but every book starts with like the word archangel. So I'll just get them up. The first one is called, the first one's called Angel's Blood. Interesting. And that actually, when I was reading on her website, it had been nominated for lots of kind of awards, you know, best romantasy of, it would have been like 2012 or 2014. And that's the other thing. These books came out way before TikTok and the hype and all these kind of things. And she's a full-time author. She has written so many books. We talked about this in the last episode, but, you know, she is the real deal. Anyway, But the rest are all called like Archangel something, Archangel's Rise, Archangel's Consort, Archangel's Blade, Archangel's Storm. And I've got to be honest, I told Carlie already, I don't love the covers. I really don't. I'm not into them at all. Like if I had just seen the cover, I would not have picked it up. Like, in fact, I would have been like mildly repelled, I think. I would have been like, that's not my kind of book. Don't be silly. And then I'm now on book 15. No, I'm on book 14 because there's one left after this for me to read. And then book 16 is coming out in 2 weeks. What great timing. And I can't put them down.
Yeah.
And so I don't want to delve in because I did a whole little solo episode on how great they are, but they are very easy to read. And in the middle of that too, I did pick up one of the Akata. I think I picked up the Silver Flames. I feel like I picked that up and put that next to my bed for 2 days because I was like, I just need to, because I think I got sucked into some more Akata theories. You know how the next book's coming out and, everyone's trying to guess the title and who it's going to be about.
We're going to do a whole episode on theories before that book is released, aren't we? I think we need to do that.
We are, yeah.
We just need to have a chance.
We will. Well, I think we should do like a theories 101 because I do feel like that it's almost like it's such a huge world and lots of other people are so deep into it that it's almost like unless you kind of get this, I guess, intro lesson to the sort of the theories and how it's all kind of connecting and stuff, it can feel like overwhelming.
Did you see her post on Instagram last week
with the snow?
With the snow and then the wild comments underneath. It's actually Rowan because she's in the north and there's snow and pine. It's like just wow. And honestly, some of the comments I was like, geez, you're a demanding bunch, you guys in the SJM fandom, aren't they?
Like it's like a lynch mob is kind of mentality is happening of like, if you don't do what we want and give us Elaine and Azriel, which now I feel like is almost like anticlimactic. Like if they end up together, it's just like, well, everyone thought so.
Yeah. Well, this comment was like, you better be writing Gwyn and Azriel's story. We don't care about the gardener girl. No, poor Elaine.
The gardener girl.
The gardener girl.
Yeah, Elaine is being disparaged in the comments. Like they're just like, she's so boring.
Gwynriel and Illusion.
Yeah.
So Gwyn and Az and Elaine and Lucian. That's another one. Oh gosh, we need a whole episode on this. This is so fun. Yeah, let's do a separate one on just what happened with when she posted 8,500 comments on a post of her staring at a tree in the snow.
Okay, so back to the topic at hand. What are we discussing again?
Are we becoming more, are our expectations increasing? And are we becoming more discerning or more critical or just becoming more aware of the different types of books we're reading, what we're enjoying? Can you share, though, where this has come from, why you brought up this topic? So what you've been experiencing or conversations you've been having or things you've been seeing around this?
I did watch a video and then that got me thinking. I think the woman was saying something about how she is considering going back through her Goodreads and changing her reviews now because she felt like she gave out too many 5-star reviews. And now that she's read many more books, she feels like the 5-star should feel really special. Like, whereas originally she was just so excited to be reading these books that everything felt like a 5-star without much to compare it to. So I started to think about that because I don't really rate the books anywhere. It's more like a mental thing of like, how much did I love it? And that also correlates to how often would I reread it. So generally the books that I really loved that I thought were a 5-star, even if they're traumatic, like Kingdom of Ash, I will reread. Like I have reread Kingdom of Ash at least 5 or 6 times, already. And I know that I'm going, it's like a masochistic, I know I'm going in and it's going to hurt. Like it doesn't matter how aware I know of that scene. I'm like, it still hurts. So I had that video. I saw that video. It just kind of popped up. It was just a book talker kind of musing, saying like, I'm thinking about doing this because it now feels a bit, she didn't use the word disingenuous. She used something more like inaccurate, I think. She said something like it feels inaccurate or not a correct representation of kind of how I feel about the book now. And I was like, would I change what I had rated books if I had been rating? Or um, do I struggle to find as many 5-star kind of experiences because I now know what I'm looking for? Um,
Mm.
in a way, has because I've read so many more books, has my kind of sort of like scope of hits me in the feels, has that actually become more narrow, is kind of what I wanted to discuss here in terms
Mhm.
of there's a lot of books that keep getting recommended and we're slowly working our way through them. But I think we've both had experiences where we've read books and been a bit like, I mean, it was good, but it wasn't as good as I thought it was going to be. And I think
Yeah.
we also have to mention that we both seem to be affected by what happens in our lives and how we're physically, mentally, emotionally feeling. So I did have that experience of, I just read the Spark of the Everflame series and I really enjoyed it, but I was very angry in many parts of it, which so I wouldn't be like, that is one of my favorite series, because I was like, I felt so enraged for at least half of it. Like, I was just like, these are such stupid decisions, like, But I'm wondering if that was because at the time I had COVID and I was so grumpy. I was so grumpy. And I think, and I told Carly this, and I was like, I wonder if I will have that if I reread it now, and I can never get the first read back, you can never get the first read back, but would I go through and not be as annoyed by some of the characters' decisions?
Yeah.
So I think I just wanted to like kind of muse on this topic because I feel like we keep reading more and more books, and I feel like there is this sort of thing that happens where that SJM world sits at a bit of the pinnacle. Like it's very hard to compete with Kingdom of Ash. I mean, I love Akatar, yes, but I don't know what has sat next to the Throne of Glass series. Like that, nothing has really sat next to that in the same way for me yet.
Yeah.
Wondering, like,
Mm.
as we read more, do we continue to compare it to these same kind of like few books, or will we start to, it doesn't matter what the books are, it's what our little romantasy sweet spot is, like,
Yeah. Yeah, I
what do
think
you
all those
think?
variables are valid and need to be taken into consideration. What comes up for me when I think about that question of like, are we becoming more discerning, critical, are our expectations changing? Is about, yeah, what's happening in your life and where you're at on your journey of reading romantic fantasy or whatever you're into. This can apply to any genre, obviously. What's going on in your life, where you're at developmentally, what you're looking for, what your expectations are. And so that all feeds into the experience you have of reading that book at that moment. And I think about, in a similar way, how this shows up in things like movies, right? Like I have movies that I've watched when I was a child that I have such fond memories of, and I can still feel what I felt when I was 12 watching that or 15 watching that. That if I went back and watched it now, would probably ruin that illusion that I have in my head or that experience that I have in my cells of what that was like the first time. So I kind of think about books in a similar way. So if I went back and read a book that I loved, like I loved a book called Tully when I was in my adolescence, and I just remember it
Oh
being
yeah,
the
I love
most,
that one.
I loved it so much. But I think if I read it now, I'd be like, oh, that's like, yeah, super basic, and I can't relate to it anymore. And I've moved past it. So for me, I like to kind of think about preserving some of that energy around a book or a movie or an experience and not going back. I know you love to reread certain books because they're still like God tier to you. And there's a few books like that for me, like The Lost Flowers of Alice Hart, that I've read 3 times and also watched the TV show and will probably read for eternity. But there are some that I'm like, no, I'm just going to leave them there. And I know that if I read them again now, yeah, they would definitely slip down and I would probably re-rate them lower. And I think it's also about like, once you've had a premium, beautiful, like dark chocolate mousse that Majella was raving about before we got into this episode to me, can you go back to a cheap Cadbury,
You cannot.
you cannot.
You can't.
You cannot.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
should we compare the two? Probably not. So I think like those are the things that were coming up as you were talking about for me, like just, some books are really sentimental and I just have great memories of. I'm like, no, I'm not going to read them again because I think that I will judge them in a different way. And then, yeah, more recently, there have been some fantasy romance books that I have read that have been so hyped and so well marketed and pushed out there in book talk that I was like, yeah, less than excited. And I guess the words I always use this when I message Majella. I'm like, yeah, it's just not grabbing me. It's just not grabbing me. It's not bad. It's not terrible. I'm not going to go out and tell everyone that they shouldn't read it because it's not. It's fine. It's good, but it's not grabbing me. And that's okay because not every book's going to do that. And then there's some, yeah, like Kingdom of Ash for me recently that have just, yeah, taken my breath away. So I am looking for more. Like you can't go from reading Kingdom of Ash to reading some of these really light 300-page, very thin, one sort of storyline, two main characters, one POV, not a really complex kind of world. You just can't compare the two. You can't say, well, that one was really awful and average because I've come off the back of this sweeping epic eight-part series. So I think for me, I go in with that. I'm really aware. I'm just really aware that I'm going in to read this one. It's probably going to be quite, basic. It might be the author's first book they've ever written. Like just going in and still trying to enjoy it, but having that as awareness that I'm not going to go online and trash it and rate it like 1 star and drag that author through the mud. I'm not going to do that because other people, it might be their first book they've ever read in the genre and they're completely blown away by it, So all of that I think plays in to this conversation that we're having. But yeah, definitely my taste is changing and evolving as it should, I think.
Yes. Interesting. It is an interesting thing to ponder because I do think that I feel like reading, though, is such a form of escapism and a form of emotional comfort for so many people that there is this sort of aspect of it as well that some people, and I do this depending on what I need or kind of like what's going on in my life, but I do feel like there's almost this sense of comfort in the predictability and the dependability of the genre to be like, I'm going to pick up this book. It's going to kind of sit in the middle level. It's going to have like a romance forward plot. There's going to be something to defeat. It's going to be a world that's different to ours. So I think that there's always going to be this kind of level of comfort that people seek when they're reading. And I think that feels different to potentially people who are kind of going in thinking about it more, like with more discernment. I do think that now that sort of reading has become like a thing again, people are becoming more critical of it because they're using it for content.
Yeah.
They're using it as part of their like career as a reviewer or something. So I think that there's almost like two sort of camps. There's a kind of like the reader who's reading just for enjoyment. They may never tell anyone what they thought of the book. They may not rate it ever. It's just more like, did that scratch the itch that I currently have for needing escapism or to feel inspired or to feel turned on or to feel whatever? And then we've kind of got this new camp of sort of people who are reading so much and they're comparing across authors and across tropes and across like the subgenres to be like, that's where I feel like the critical aspect of things are coming into it. Like I don't feel like I'm ever very critical I think you know this because I've recommended a few books to you that were just so heavy on the smart and you're a bit like, what is this? And I was like, oh my God, it was so fun. It was like a Peter Pan retelling and, I think that if I went back to it and kind of looked at it and read it, maybe with a bit more discernment, I'd be like,
not enough
maybe they're not the best sentence. But it's like, I wasn't reading it for, like, I literally just liked this idea of like a super hot, kind of dark, little bit twisted Peter Pan and the Lost Boys. I mean, it was just like on an island with one woman, like, so I was just like, what is it?
You're ovulating completely when you read that.
Well, what's not to like about that? But I do think if you'd gone in being like, am I going to like feel all these things? What is the character arcs? Like what are the plot points
Mm.
here? Does have a blah blah. I mean, in saying that though, that particular author is very successful in that weird, dark, smutty, no plot genre. Like she
Oh,
has written like 40 books and she has a devoted
yeah.
fan base because those books are so easy to read and they still sit in that sort of romantasy genre, but they don't have the complexity and the nuance of,
Of
some
course.
of our other books that we love. But it's
Yeah.
scratching a different itch, I guess, or giving you a different sort of like experience.
And I think, like, for our listeners, I want to make this really clear. Like, if you're just getting into this genre, you've just found our podcast, or you're following us on TikTok and Instagram, you're like, oh, I really want to get back into reading, and I'd love to explore fantasy romance because I've never read it. Like, read from lots of different authors, read 300 pages, read 1,000 pages, read what standalones, read series, explore for you what's going to scratch the itch and what's going to feel great, because that's what we've been doing in the last couple of years. And the things that we recommend, the books that we might recommend to people now might be really different, and probably are really different to, apart from Akatar. I mean, that's just probably going to be a standard recommendation for us forever. But,
And King
as
Kong, the Throne of Glass, like
yeah. Like, Majella's just introduced me to the Guild Hunter series. She's just done episode 30, solo episode, all on that herself because she's read them nearly all in 2 and a bit weeks. And so it's, okay. Like, okay, I'll put that on my list. Like, so when we're sharing these kind of conversations, I want you as a listener to think about just where am I at, and, go into it with that kind of open mind of trying lots of different stuff. And not everything's for you, and that's cool. Um, where I'm at now is that I have 32 books on my TBR list. And so I also don't want to read stuff that I'm not enjoying. So I'm really happy to DNF and go, this is just not holding me enough. My time is precious. And when I'm reading, I really want to be in it and really swept away by the story and really captivated. So it has to still have enough for me. And I don't DNF a lot at all because I think our recommendations are quite amazing, to be honest. I think we do quite a good job of recommending to each other and finding people online to follow that we gel with their recommendations. But I'm happy to put it down. Like, there's one I've just read really, really recently that I still read and enjoyed, but it was like, meh, like it didn't quite, I don't know, it just didn't really envelop me in the story quite as much as I hoped it would. But there was enough there to read it. But I'm happy to put it down. So I just wanted to add that in. Like, if you're not enjoying something, put it down. You don't have to share it with TikTok that you've DNF'd it. You don't have to tell anyone. You just put it back in the library or give it to the op shop, or, quietly
mm,
just go on your way and pick something else. There's so much out there to read when you start to explore this genre. There's so much that we haven't even, like Majella was saying, we've done 30 episodes and we haven't even begun. Like, there are thousands, oh, how exciting. There are thousands and thousands of books and authors out there. So I think that it's okay to become, your expectations to shift, to become more discerning, to listen to yourself more and what you like, and to follow that, and to be okay with DNFing. I think that's all part of the reading journey as you mature and grow and develop.
I don't think we identify, like, I don't think we have sort of like hitched parts of our identity to certain books or certain characters. I mean, we appreciate it and I love being in the world. And I think I, am happy to be part of my identity is that of a reader, is someone who enjoys some escapism, but I don't feel that we, like, if we kept reading and in 2 years' time after reading, countless more books, and I turned around and said, Carlie, I just don't know if Akatar is my thing anymore. Like, there would be no judgment. There'd be no like, oh my God, but that's the book that we love that book. Like, that book is part of us, They'd be like, wow, but I could kind of see it happening because like the last 20 books you've read have been more like this. So I could see how you could have evolved out of that and stuff. But like, I still really love it, So I feel like
Mm.
it was a great point you mentioned about how like it's more. I feel like when I guess when I was thinking about this about are we becoming more critical? A better way to put that is that we are becoming more aware of what we're enjoying. And I think it becomes obvious quickly as well when it's just the actual book isn't quite coming together. Like, and that's nothing against the author, but it's either that she just doesn't, or they don't have enough experience. It didn't get enough edits. It wasn't, the idea itself wasn't fleshed out in the right way or something. But I think that we can tell quite quickly if it's not at a certain standard where we can step into that world, because that's what good writing does. It takes away the barrier between reality and where you're going. So when you can still notice the barrier, like when you're tripping up a step as you walk into the world, or when you're trying to open the door, but it's like a little bit sticky and you're like, I just want to get in here because I feel like there's going to be things I like in here. And you're like, oh, it's a bit stuck. That's kind of how I feel like those books are just out now. Like I wish that author the best, but I'm like, again, with the time. And it's not even a DNF sometimes because I'm not into the actual book plot or the characters, but it's just there'll be something or how it's all come together where I'm like, oh, I just don't get the feeling. I'm not getting the feeling, which is why also sometimes when something could be written, maybe not so well or have like massive plot holes or whatever, but I get that feeling. Oh my God, I'm in. I don't care. It's just, I'm in that world. There was no friction between here and the next. I slid on in.
And
I
you
was
know
like,
what?
oh, it's great.
We just don't yuck other people's yums. Like if someone says to me, oh my God, I just read this book and I freaking loved it. It became my whole life and I became part of it and those characters are real to me and I just lost myself in it and I absolutely had the ride of my life. And then they tell me the book name and I'm like, oh my God, I DNF'd that. I couldn't. I am still so freaking happy for their experience and journey and the fact that they're reading. I'm like, go you. Absolutely amazing.
Exactly. You would never think less of them. You'd never talk down to them. You'd never be like, oh my God, I can't believe you like that. Or how did you connect it? You'd just be like, wow, we had different experiences. And I love that happens when we read a book.
And I'm not going to look down my nose at you and also go, oh, yes, well, I enjoyed that too. But that was back when I was, 37 and I was just new to the genre and I didn't really know what great writing was. Like, come on, it's reading. Everyone has a different experience. Everyone likes different movies. Everyone likes different food. Everyone likes different humans. Excellent. But for me personally, I can see it evolving. I can see when books feel a little bit, I love Majella a few weeks ago, she used the word thin and I was like, that's it, like a little bit thin or lacking for me, and I just move on, and that's okay because how fun that I've got so many different books to jump into. But yeah, I am becoming more discerning. I am becoming more aware of what I like, which tropes I'm really enjoying. Like I've really discovered recently that I enjoy when he falls first, which is not one that was a previous trope that I loved. I'm like, oh, I like when he falls first. Like he just knows instantly. And then it takes a little while for her to catch up. Yeah. Obviously enemies to lovers, obviously slow burn. So I'm really...
I love the one bed. The one bed here. We're going to have to share a bed.
One bed in the inn.
Like, I mean, there's so many good ones. But yeah, I think that was an interesting episode. We'd love to know what you think about it, because I do know that some people really, for them, it's actually an enjoyable exercise to be quite critical, in a way to be like, I really like to be clear on what is good and what is bad for me. And I like to have standards. And that's a totally fine way to approach your reading experience. But I'm wondering if it's, and I also wonder if it's also because we're a bit older. Like, I feel like maybe in my 20s, I could see myself becoming competitive, or a bit like, what's that word? Like when you kind of when you feel like you own something. Like I could very easily have sort of identified as like, I'm the romantasy reader and I am a fast reader and I have read this many books more than you. And I wouldn't have probably said it out loud, but it would have been in my like internal space, being like, like this is a way to prove that I'm in some way better than you at this. Like, because there was much more competitiveness, I feel, as a teenager. Whereas now it's more just like, oh my God, if like you get to sit down and enjoy a book, and I get to sit down and enjoy a book, and it's uninterrupted book time. Like, we have both just won.
Yep.
Like, look at us winning at life. You sat down, I sat down. I hate your book. You think mine is trash. We don't care. Like, you know what I mean? Like, winning. And I just would love to know if the listeners have an experience that are they really go with the flow readers? Has their reading preferences changed since they've started reading romantasy? You know, I know that ours has, in a way, I feel like definitely for me, it has narrowed my reading world, because I have very little desire to step out of it at the moment. You know, I'm not reading a vast array of different genres, and I'm not going to different categories in the bookstore. I'm just going to this one shelf, and then I'm just like, and then I might go to like the sale shelf, and I'm like, are there any of those books that were on that shelf on this sale shelf? And that's my two spots. And then maybe like to the journals and like the fun games, you know, that they always have in bookstores. That's where I go. You know, whereas I used to kind of wander through the biographies, or I'd go to the art books, or I'd go and, you know, want to read the self-help or the business sections, whereas now it's like it's just literally just the one spot in the bookstore, you know, and I don't feel any remorse about that direction change. But I think it would be interesting to see if other people, what their experiences have been with their kind of reading romantasy.
Yeah.
So please tell us, please
tell us. But I also want to give a little bit of a call out to our book club. So on the Fable app, we've got Fated the Book Club, because in the coming months, we want to start putting up a poll and asking you guys to recommend books that we can read. So we've recommended books for the last couple of months. We'll probably do so again maybe for May, depending on how the book club is growing. But we would really love to get to a point where you guys are saying, oh my gosh, this book changed my life, or oh my gosh, this was the most incredible story, and I want to put this up for the book club to choose. And so we do a poll. So if you would like to join a really fun, relaxed, chill, quirky little book club with Majella and I and a few other awesome readers, jump onto the Fable app, download it. It's completely free. Search for Fated the Book Club. And you can join in April. We're reading Ledge by Stacey McEwen, which is epic and is one of a 3-book series. Book 3 coming out, I think, in September. So you can dive in and start reading with us in April if you so wish. We'd love to have you. Okay, we'll wrap this one up.
Yes, we would.
Lovely to chat with you again.
Great.
Nice to be back. Good chats. Ciao.
It's great to be back. Good chat. Ciao, ciao.
Thank you so much for listening. We hope that you felt like you were eavesdropping on a conversation that you have been dying to have with someone to discuss all the tiny details and possible plot twists of the books that you've recently read. Perhaps you don't have someone to chat to after you finish one of those epic books, so please give the show a follow and we would be honoured to be your book-obsessed friends. But mostly though, we hope it was fun, it gave you a giggle, it made you gasp or encouraged you to pick up a different author. Please share it with someone who you think would also love it, and drop us a review, letting us know what you loved and what you want to hear from us in the future. We will be back with another episode soon. Happy reading.